Hey, we're back on The Reckoning on the Real Talk Radio Network, and we are cruising along here into our last half hour. Thank you for sticking it out with me, folks, and for hanging on. We had governor candidate Senator Bill Eigel hop on there and kind of wiggling around in our schedule. But we are joined now by Representative Tony Lovasco, 64th District here in St. Charles County in the State House, running for re-election this year. And a listener brought him to my attention and asked that we have him on. So, like I said, folks, we're going to keep marching through all of the candidates that we're going to be looking at here August 6th. So happy to have him on now. How are you doing today, Representative Lovasco?
Oh, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Absolutely. I'm happy to have you on. Happy to have the opportunity for my audience to meet you. I know we've got folks all over the state, but boy, there was so much kerfuffle in the state legislature, both the House and the Senate this year. I think we got a lot of extra attention from all over, people looking in and kind of looking folks up. And yeah, I would love if you just take a moment. I'd love to hear kind of your background. I know you're the incumbent in this district, running again. I think you do have a primary challenger, if I'm not mistaken. And there's obviously a path forward in Missouri. We've got a lot of decisions, a lot of offices up for grabs. So yeah, just take a moment to introduce yourself to my audience here. I know you've probably, I'm not sure if you've been on one of our time slots before, but I know I haven't had you on. So I'd love to hear that and some of your priorities and what you're looking at going back into the House with this election coming up in just a few weeks.
Oh, absolutely. So as you mentioned, this is going into my fourth and final term. Of course, we're term limited here in Missouri to 8 years. Was reelected to replace Robert Cornejo when he left to join the Labor Commission back in 2019. So I've been serving ever since. I represent the areas of northern O'Fallon and western St. Charles County, the district more or less. If you take Highway 70 and Highway 79 and you consider those borders, I go all the way north up to the Lincoln County line, and I go all the way west to the Warren County line, except for Wentzville. I don't have most of Wentzville. I've got only a couple subdivisions out in that area. But I do have most of North O'Fallon, as well as Flint Hill, Josephville, St. Paul, all those good areas, Forestell. So going up for re-election here on August 6th, of course. I do have a primary challenger, which wasn't my first choice, but it is part of the process, and it's important to have folks get their say and decide the future of the 64th District. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to meet with the voters once again and make my pitch.
Absolutely, and I know I've seen a lot of the ratings floating around. You've got quite a few ratings coming in from different places. I think I saw, let me see here. I've been floating through so many of these. I'm going a little cross-eyed looking at them, but I saw several of the Liberty ratings coming in. I've seen Missouri Firearms Coalition, at least in the past, has definitely been a big fan of some of your priorities. But yeah, I mean, let me come down to this, because I know that there was a lot back and forth. This next session, I hope we're going to have some big knockdown, drag-out fights about things that couldn't get done, particularly initiative petition reform, getting some of those things through, and hopefully with some new state executive officers. Let me ask you specifically, first of all, initiative petition reform, what are your thoughts about what happened this past year in the legislature, and what are some plans potentially, or some ideas you have that we could get that through next year if that's something that you support? And then what would be your top one or two priorities specifically entering this last term that you get?
Sure. So I definitely support initiative petition reform. Honestly, I was incredibly frustrated that we didn't get it done this year, but I was more frustrated that we didn't get it done last year, because really that was the time to do it. The whole idea behind making this a massive push was to stop the obvious incursion on the Constitution that we were going to have this November with the abortion issue. And we couldn't get it done last year. I don't know why, other than leadership completely dropped the ball on like 6 different occasions, so I guess I do know why. And then this year, with the infighting in the Senate and things kind of melting down, we lost a massive opportunity to kind of get ahead of this, because, quite frankly, we are going to have a challenge in November when it comes to that abortion petition. And, while I do think that Missouri remains a very strong pro-life state, that ballot language is tricky, and I think it's going to fool some folks. And so we really got to make a big push to make sure that we tell everybody that we know to vote against that thing when it comes up.
Absolutely. Now let me ask one question. I was, we got really excited last night as a small government guy, especially when it comes to education. I got really excited in the gubernatorial forum. There was a lot of beating up on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education here in Missouri. I know you've got great ratings from AFP and from a lot of the other, Make Liberty Win I saw NRA, a bunch of different folks, Missouri Right to Life. But let me ask you specifically, when it comes to education in Missouri, I know that there was a big discussion, a little bit of a heated discussion over the huge elementary and secondary education bill that went through. The House and the Senate version, I know SB 727, the House number escapes me, but it kind of kicked off the discussion. Okay, as school choice advocates, at what point do we say it's time to stop just shifting government money and the strings that are attached to it from school districts to students and start to remove some of the government strings and the government tie-ins that come back to it? Because I know a lot of the homeschool families, that was their first question, but what if I don't want in at all? And what if we don't want to move this direction at all? I know that one of the big answers was, we'll just don't participate. But the reality is I'd love for Missouri not to participate. So I'm curious your thoughts on that specifically, and if there is a chance of moving forward to get a little bit less government, even at the state level, bring it down more local in education here in Missouri. What do you think for the legislature moving forward?
Well, sure. I think, honestly, the solution isn't to move it local. It's to eliminate the interference entirely. I think really the parents ought to be the ones making these decisions. And as much as it's better to see a decision made perhaps by your local community and school boards than from DESE, let's be honest, we don't exactly control the school boards en masse when it comes to conservative representation. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence that local school boards are going to do any better job regulating education than DESE does. The solution ultimately is to not regulate it at all. We need to let people keep as much of their money as possible. The Constitution mandates that the state spend 25% of its budget on public education, and while I'm not a fan of that provision, it's in there for the moment unless there's a considered effort to remove it. I would say we should fund that and not a dime more.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with you on that one. That is something very exciting to hear more and more legislators talk about, because I know that was a big one. A lot of folks, hey, this is good, school choice, moving money toward the students, and I know a lot of other folks said, well, what about instead of school choice, what about educational freedom? To your point, the most local I can think of is the parents. And that is where I love to hear a lot of our state representatives moving forward, our state senators in that direction, saying, let's just eliminate the ties altogether. Let me ask you this. Moving into August, I'm pretty sure I've seen your opponent's name before. I think she's run at a different point in the past. What are a couple major distinctions you would draw, a direction or a principle that you're going to move forward on, something that you think is a distinction for you over an opponent in this last term that you're seeking a re-election for?
Oh, sure. I'm not going to use your airtime to badmouth my opponent, but I will say this. I've got a very proven record with votes going back the last 6 years. As you mentioned, I've got excellent conservative scorecards. American Conservative Union, 100%. Club for Growth, 100%. It goes on. You can go to my website. You see my flyers. You see all that. My opponent doesn't have that. She has not articulated specific policy proponents on a variety of issues beyond the, standard gun babies, cops, Republican things that everyone says. You have to be specific about your values beyond just the basic platform positions, because otherwise the voters don't quite know what they're voting on. And I think she's very enthusiastic. She wants to serve. I do think she's pretty conservative. I'll give her that. But the reality is, when it comes down to facing the pressure in Jeff City and voting on the big omnibus bills with the garbage that's laden in there, do you have the courage and the ability to stand up and take the tough vote, even if you're the only one out of 163 members to do that? I've done that many occasions. I was one of, I think, a dozen people that voted against the budget, and I was one of two who voted against the entire budget. So I've been there. I've done that. I know what it feels like, and sometimes it's rough, but I do it anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to do what the right thing is, no matter what the crowd is doing. And we always appreciate folks who do that here on the Real Talk Radio Network. Let me ask you one final question. I know we're coming down to just the last few minutes here. I saw one thing, and let me ask you to get into this, just because I'd love to have a clarification. I saw a couple of things floating around. I know that you, at one point, were on the St. Charles County Republican Central Committee, but that you resigned. I've heard a few people mentioning that again, and a couple folks asked me to ask about that. They heard of it, but it's happened in the past. I think actually about a year ago. So I just wonder, what happened with that? Is there still some sort of issue there, or what was the kerfuffle about? And then I'm just kind of curious about that situation, if I can hear from your perspective. I know you resigned and had been on for a number of years on the committee, and I'm kind of curious what the situation was.
Sure. I mean, it's a very long story, but I would say that the short version, quite a few folks came into the committee the last cycle, folks that had not been part of the process in the past. very enthusiastic, very willing to make some changes, which I think is positive. Unfortunately, the defining goal of a lot of these folks was to kind of use the Central Committee, which is the branding of the Republican Party at the local level, as a mechanism with which to kind of go after folks that they thought were not sufficiently Republican. And while I support the idea of holding people accountable, especially in elected office, as private citizens, I think that groups and organizations and individuals ought to be making sure that if their representation is not doing a good job and are not really Republicans, that they be called out. I don't think it's appropriate to use the brand of the party to do that. Because when you do that, you tell candidates that, you know what, if ever you disagree with us, if ever we part ways on a particular issue, we're going to be there to stab you in the back and go after you. And that's not a way to raise money. That's not a way to expand the influence of the party. And it's certainly not a way to grow and make sure that St. Charles County stays solid red. Because we're moving in the purple direction out on the eastern side of this county, and we need to stop that. And we can't do that if we're fighting our own.
Well, and I mean, you make a good point. I mean, winning, you have to win, and you have to be unified to win. But I mean, I guess that makes me beg the question. I know this has been on a lot of people's minds at the national level because of the platform draft that is currently circulating. The RNC obviously hasn't voted on that. That comes up this coming week. But a lot of folks saying, hey, you know, we've just removed a lot of the very clear and specific language for life and family that was there. This is very stripped down and simple. It looks like a fleet, campaign set of proposals for this year. But oughtn't we to be using our party structure to continue to define who we are? And I mean, in your words, hold people accountable to that standard. This is what we the people, we the Republicans, define as republicanism. I mean, it makes me wonder, what do you think about that? Isn't this the place potentially inside the party for us to try to have those accountability measures to make sure we are abiding by this same set of principles moving forward?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the whole purpose of the party platform is to kind of define what it is that we believe a Republican is. My issue is when we start going beyond that and nitpicking on individual votes or maybe styles or even going down so far as what people haven't done. You know, there was an effort locally to go after somebody because they hadn't spoken up loudly enough about some topic that was of controversy. That's getting in the margins, and that is well outside of the scope of the official party apparatus. But when it comes to the platform, whether it be the state platform or the national platform, that needs to be solid, because if it's not, we have no guiding rod.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't actually know. I forget if you were involved, but I know that just today we were celebrating the big victory for the Missouri delegates, the rightfully elected delegates, it seems, from our state convention are reinstated and heading up. So I wonder, I mean, have you heard any rumblings of our state party platform? You bring it up. I know that there's been a little bit of discussion amongst some of the folks who were there and party leadership and some legislators. Have you heard any rumblings about that? If they're going to come back around and try to have the grassroots do another attempt at the platform, or is that something that's been kind of off your radar?
It has been off my radar. I have not been involved in those discussions. I will say that it is kind of ridiculous that you go through that entire process and have hundreds of people spend, 10 hours coming up with proposals just to kind of shrug it off and say, never mind. I don't think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, no, I think it was pretty terribly disenfranchising for a lot of the folks who committed time and were, by all accounts, heading towards some really good policy proposals and platform points there. It was very, very good. But but no, hey, I guess what? I appreciate so much you coming on and being a part of the discussion here. We wish you all the best in your race, and let us know where we can find you online.
Oh, absolutely. You can find me at TonyLovasco.com. I'm also on X at Tony Lovasco.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir, and we will look forward to talking to you another time. Appreciate your time and appreciate your running. All right, folks, we're going to run real quick and then be right back. Last few minutes of The Reckoning here, just on the other side of the break.